Hello everyone. I would like to talk to you today about the cycle of abuse, domestic violence. Okay, domestic violence doesn't happen overnight. There's a process actually. Do you think any woman or any man would go into a relationship if the person who was the abuser was showing abusive things right away? No, they wouldn't. Domestic violence takes time. It's a process. So I would like to talk to you about my experience with domestic violence and the process of the cycle in which it happens. Now, I was raised in a domestic violent home, and during the time when I was raised, my mother didn't have a whole lot of resources to get out. There wasn't a lot of education like there is today, in shelters and books and movies and places you can go to get help. Back then, a woman just stayed and put up with it just to keep her family together. So I watched my mother, my siblings and I watched my mother being abused. Sometimes she was beaten to the point where we couldn't recognize her face. Yes, she would leave and go to her mother's house or a family member's house, and she would always go back because he would always promise that he would never do it again and that he had changed. And yes, things were good for a while, a month or two, but it always went back to the same. She was continued to be being beaten. So many of my siblings and I, some of my siblings married young to get out of the house, and some of them married people who abused them too, or some of them became abusers. So whenever I married, I thought I married a great guy, and we dated for over 6 months, and we got engaged, and then we got married, and we were building a family together. Well, I remember when I was 3 months pregnant, and with our first child, he drank, and he got angry, and he threw a chair across the room. And I remember how scared I was, because I'd never seen him act that way before. So red flags went up, and I'm thinking, oh my God, But I stayed because I was pregnant, and I thought, well, he would never hurt me. He would never hit me. Well, things got worse, because I moved from Oregon to San Francisco to be with him. And that's what abusers do. They begin to isolate you from your family and friends. So he isolated me from my family. He didn't like my friends, especially the ones that were independent and strong women. So eventually I started getting rid of my independent girlfriends and only being around the women that he was comfortable with, right? The ones that were kind of neutral, that never really said anything about the way I was being treated. Well, then he started disciplining our children very harshly and with anger, and beating them with belts, the way that I was beaten as a child. And I began to protect my children from their own father. It's pretty bad whenever a mother has to protect her children from their own father. Okay, so I begged him to get help. We were in church together, and the pastor started talking to us, and I tried to get the church to mediate, but yet he was the man, so what he said went, and so then he started accusing me of wanting to have sex with the guys at work, the couples that were our friends' husbands. I wasn't allowed to have male doctors, because if I did, I was wanting to have sex with them. Well, my husband was Arabic, and I'm not stereotyping Arabs, okay, because there are plenty of jealous men in America. But he was a very jealous man and very controlling. And you would think I would have seen the signs before, but I didn't. So he began to humiliate me, call me names, try to lock me in the house, strangle me when he got angry, hit me, and of course I would leave, but I would always go back because he promised to change and never do it again. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror one day and saying, "Who are you? I don't know you anymore." Because my friends and family, they would say, "You're not the same person anymore." And I wasn't. I had changed so much for this man, because he had told me, and I believed him, that I was the problem in our marriage. I was the main problem, and I was the reason why he was angry all the time. I was the reason why he was so miserable. He would blame me for his misery. So finally, the church put me in a shelter, and I was gone for 3 months. I remember the lady in the shelter telling me, "Ma'am, you need to get a backbone. You have no backbone." And I didn't. I had lost it. Or if I ever had one, I didn't know. Because I didn't have, God only knows I didn't have good examples from parents, right? My mother was being beaten. My father was beating her, and she was staying. So no good examples, right? So when I got out of the shelter, I went back to my husband. He had proven to me, which I thought, that he was a better person. He was going to church, he was in counseling, he was fasting, and he was praying. He was even in a men's prayer group and men's Bible study, learning how to be a better father and a better husband. So went back 3 months later, back to the same thing again. I felt trapped. I felt, how am I going to make a life? I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped. So I found myself becoming ill. I got down to 96 pounds. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I wanted to commit suicide. I felt that that was the only way out. That's how bad it got in my thinking. The only way out was to commit suicide. So I tried to think of ways I could die. Fortunately enough, a group of ladies from the church began befriending me and counseling me and encouraging me. And I went to counseling. I started getting help. I started looking into the Bible and seeing really how women should be treated, and using the example of Jesus Christ. And my husband was not being a good Christian example in how he was supposed to be treating his wife or his children. So I started realizing that God loved me and that I should be treated better, and that the way that my husband was treating me was not godly. He was not treating me correctly or his children. So I started getting strength through counseling and education of how I was supposed to be treated. And I looked at myself continuously, and I kept telling myself, I deserve better, I deserve better, I deserve better. So the one day I'd had enough, and I stood in his face, because I could never look him into his eyes because I was afraid of him. And I stood in his face and I said, "You will not hurt me anymore. You will not. You will not." I said, "I deserve better than you." He smiled, and thought, "Oh, this woman's crazy," telling me I was crazy, like many times before. Because men who abuse and oppress women, they will isolate them from their family, isolate them from their friends, tell them that they are crazy, tell them that they are the problem for all of the things that go wrong in their marriage. It is all of their fault. And women believe it, because you don't have enough confidence to begin with, and you begin to believe it. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes years for it to happen. And the sad thing is a lot of women will attempt at least 7 times to leave permanently, because she goes back. She keeps going back because she keeps believing it, because she wants to keep her family together, her children together. So I left. I walked away. I left the house, all the material possessions, and I got out, and I got myself a little apartment with nothing. But I had my dignity and my pride and my kids. So you need to ask yourself, is the house worth it? Is the house worth more than your dignity? Because you're teaching your children to grow up to be abusers. You're teaching your sons to be abusers, and you're teaching your daughters to be abused. Or vice versa. You might even be teaching your daughters to abuse their husbands, because men are abused by women also. So ask yourself, is it worth it? Do you want to break the cycle of abuse in your family? You need to be good examples for your children. You're not teaching them. You're not teaching them to protect themselves. You're not teaching them to be strong. Because what normal man would want to abuse his wife, right? What normal man wants to beat his wife and call her names and humiliate her? A normal man wouldn't do that. There are plenty of normal men out there, okay, who don't abuse their wives or their girlfriends or their mothers, okay, or their sisters. So get out, and once you do, get yourself help. Get help. Break the cycle. Find out what it was that caused yourself to get to that point. But don't get back into a situation or relationship right away, because you will just attract and find an abuser again. Get all the help you can. 1, 2, 3 years, whatever it takes to get healthy, because you're not healthy. You allowed it to happen, and you need to find out why you did. You need to love yourself enough and have enough confidence to not allow it to happen again. Now, I've been divorced for 7 years. What did my husband do? He married himself. What did my ex-husband do? He married himself a woman who he abuses, a weaker vessel. He's been married for 6 years to her, and she puts up with it. Myself now, I have enough confidence in myself and I love myself enough that I will not allow it to happen. Abusers are not attracted to me, because I will tell them off after the first date. I know the signs to look for an abuser, and you need to do the same thing. You need to walk away. It's not worth it, no matter how much money he's given you, no matter how big and beautiful your home is, or no matter how many kids you have with the man, because he's already proven that he's not a good person. He's not a good man. He's not a good father. He's not a good husband. Why would you want it to be an example? Show your children that you are strong. Show your children you love yourself enough and them to get out. Thank you. I hope this video has given you some examples and warning signs of what to look for and what the steps are that you need to take to get out. Call the hotlines, call the shelters, get counseling, go to classes, get in a domestic violence group, a support group, and take the necessary steps to make a better life for you and your children. Thank you.